We thought we had seen everything the cosmos had to offer. Black holes that whispered like dying gods, planets made of ice so cold they burned, ancient ruins drifting through space with messages no one could decipher. But nothing could have prepared us for what we found in the void. It started as an anomaly, a disturbance in deep space, outside any map system. Our long-range scanners picked up gravitational distortions too large to be a mere asteroid field, yet too irregular to be a planet. Whatever it was, it didn't orbit a star. It just floated, dead and still, in the darkness. So, naturally, we did what explorers do. We investigated. Our ship, the Erebus, was a deep space research vessel designed to withstand the unknown. We had seen 1,000 anomalies before and logged them all. This was supposed to be no different. We were wrong. As we got closer, we saw it wasn't just some rogue celestial body. It was something else. A shape emerged from the darkness, a massive form stretching across the void. It was difficult to comprehend at first. Our minds rejected the scale. It was larger than a planet, its vast body coiling through space like some impossibly massive serpent. It wasn't just an anomaly, it was alive, or at least it had been. The thing looked ancient, its immense body covered in something resembling scales, dark, metallic, and cratered with scars of old impacts. At first, we thought it was dead, just another relic drifting in the endless black. But then the scanners picked up something chilling. It was breathing, slow, deep, cosmic breaths. We had to get closer. The Erebus deployed its smaller reconnaissance ship, the Argos, and a team of 6 of us boarded. Myself, Captain Delara Vasquez, our pilot Oren Kai, scientist Dr. Emil Novak, engineer Miko Hasegawa, and 2 security officers, Lieutenant Rajar Patel and Corporal Lena Greaves. As we descended toward the creature's surface, the scale of it became even more overwhelming. Mountains of hardened flesh and ridges of what looked like ancient bone jutted from its hide. The surface was not smooth but textured, like the skin of some impossibly vast, hibernating titan. We found a clearing near what appeared to be a valley formed in the folds of its flesh. The ground beneath us was firm, as if petrified over eons. The air was thin but breathable. That alone should have been impossible. We stepped out, weapons drawn, nerves tight. Everything was silent. Still, the only sound was the rhythmic, distant vibration of the creature's deep, slow breaths. That's when we saw them. They emerged from the ridges, their movements eerily synchronized, as if they had been waiting for us. They were humanoid, but not human. Their bodies were sleek, scaled like the great beast beneath us. Eyes like liquid fire burned in their sockets, and their elongated limbs moved with unnatural grace. They wore garments woven from some strange organic material, shimmering like living silk. And they spoke, not in words but in thoughts. Welcome. Their voices rang inside our heads, clear and resonant. Not a whisper, not an intrusion. Just there, as if they had always been speaking to us, and we had only now begun to listen. They called themselves the Vael'Zir, the keepers of the sleeper. They told us they were the caretakers of this being, this ancient titan, which they simply referred to as the Great Sleeper. They had lived upon it for generations, perhaps even longer than human civilization had existed. This was their home, their god, their world. At first, it seemed peaceful. The Vael'Zir welcomed us into their settlements, built into the ridges and valleys of the sleeper's body. Their cities were luminous structures formed from organic material, pulsating with soft bioluminescent light. Strange, floating creatures drifted through the air, illuminating the night with ghostly blue glows. The Vael'Zir shared their food with us, fruits and meats unlike anything we had ever seen. The taste was intoxicating, rich and heavy, filling our bodies with warmth and energy. They offered us places to rest, soft chambers that seemed to breathe around us, adjusting to our forms. They spoke to us of harmony, of the balance between the sleeper and themselves. They worshipped the creature, believing that it was neither dead nor fully alive, but something in between. A god in slumber, dreaming of something far greater than we could comprehend. First, everything seemed perfect. We were safe, or so we thought. At first, the changes were so subtle that I dismissed them as fatigue. Long missions in deep space had a way of wearing on the mind, making time feel sluggish, distorting thoughts. I told myself it was just the alien environment, the unsettling stillness of the sleeper's surface, the strange bioluminescent glow of the Vael'Zir cities casting shadows that felt too deep, too alive. But soon, the differences in my crewmates became undeniable. Miko, once sharp and pragmatic, had grown distant. She spoke in a measured, almost sluggish tone, her words deliberate as if language itself was foreign to her. When she walked, it was with an unsettling grace, her steps no longer casual but purposeful, as if she was moving in time with something unseen. Novak, our scientist, became eerily silent, staring off toward the horizon for hours at a time. I once found him standing on the edge of a ridge, looking out over the sleeper's vast form. His mouth slightly parted in awe. When I called his name, he turned his head too slowly. His pupils stretched into vertical slits. He only smiled and whispered, "It's so much more than we ever imagined." Vael'Zir, our security officer, had once been a man of discipline, always quick to challenge anything that seemed even remotely dangerous. But now, he moved with an unsettling fluidity, his breathing eerily synchronized with the faint, rhythmic pulses we sometimes felt beneath our feet, pulses that might have been the sleeper's breath. Something was happening to them, but Oren, Lena, and I remained unchanged. For now, we still felt the weight of our humanity, the urgent need to leave this place, the logical awareness that the longer we stayed, the more wrong everything felt. But the others, those we had trusted, those we had fought alongside, had become something else, something not human, and they no longer wanted to leave. I confronted the Vael'Zir, demanding answers. Their city, a labyrinth of softly glowing towers, was impossibly quiet. The air felt thick with an unseen presence, as if the sleeper itself was listening. The Vael'Zir stood in perfect formation, their golden eyes unblinking, their scaled faces impassive. When I demanded to know what was happening to my crew, they responded with the same eerie calm. "The change is natural," they said. "The sleeper calls to all who listen." Their words sent a chill down my spine. "What change?" I pressed. "What's happening to them?" One of the Vael'Zir, a tall figure with dark sapphire scales, stepped forward. Its gaze pierced through me, filling my mind with an overwhelming sense of insignificance. "They are becoming." My throat tightened. "Becoming what?" "More." Oren, standing beside me, clenched his fists. "That's not an answer." The Vael'Zir regarded him with something that might have been amusement, a slow, deliberate tilt of the head. "You resist because you fear, but fear is the burden of the unawakened." I glanced back at Novak, Vael'Zir, and Miko standing at the city's edge. They weren't prisoners, yet they made no effort to leave. They stood with their hands folded in front of them, their expressions serene, as if they had achieved some greater understanding. They didn't resist because they didn't want to. A terrifying realization gripped me. They weren't just changing, they were being absorbed. We had to leave, now. Oren, Lena, and I returned to our quarters, where we had kept what little equipment we had left. The Argos, our smaller reconnaissance vessel, was still intact, its engines powered down but operational. If we could reach it, we could launch ourselves back toward the Erebus and signal command. But as we packed our gear, a sickening feeling settled over me. We were being watched. Through the arched doorway, Novak stood in the corridor, silent and motionless. His gaze wasn't vacant. It was full of something else, something ancient and patient. "You don't have to fight it," he said softly. His voice no longer held the warmth of a friend. I took a step forward, gripping my sidearm. "Step aside, Novak." A slow, almost pitying smile spread across his face. "You still don't understand, do you?" I tightened my grip on the gun. "Understand what?" "That there's nothing to fight." And then, before I could react, the Vael'Zir were upon us. They came in a tide of movement too fast for us to process. One moment we were in our quarters, the next we were overwhelmed. Hands wrapped around my arms, inhumanly strong. My vision blurred as I struggled, But it was useless. Orin's shouts rang in my ears, but they were drowned out by something deeper. A pulse. It wasn't a sound. It was inside my bones. Then darkness. When I woke, I was no longer in our quarters. I was in a cage. Orin lay slumped beside me, unconscious but breathing. The walls around us pulsed like a living thing, slick with some organic material that pulsed faintly, as if the sleeper itself had woven our prison from its own flesh. Beyond the bars, Novak stood, no longer human. His skin had darkened, his features sharpened. His once bright eyes now golden slits filled with some unknowable force. And behind him, the Vael'Zir stood in rows, still as statues. I forced myself up, my breath ragged. What the hell is this? Novak tilted his head, studying me like an insect beneath glass. You were given a choice, he said. You refused. Orin stirred beside me, groaning as he came to. I clenched my fists. What are you doing to us? Novak stepped aside, revealing something behind him. A horror unlike anything I had ever seen. The remains of my crew. Lena, Miko, Rajer. All of them, kneeling before the Vael'Zir, their bodies drained. Their skin was thin and stretched, their eyes hollow, golden light flickering inside their chests like dying embers. They were still alive, but barely. And then I saw it. A shadow that wasn't a shadow. A presence lurking just beyond the Vael'Zir. Its form too vast, too impossible to comprehend. The sleeper. It wasn't just a creature. It was a god. A mind stretching across time, across worlds. Feeding, waiting. And we, our bodies, our souls, were its next meal. Novak spread his arms. You wanted the truth, he whispered. And then the feeding began. One by one, the Vael'Zir placed their hands upon my crewmates. Light poured from them, siphoning their very essence into the sleeper. Their bodies crumbled, becoming nothing but husks. Orin gripped my arm. We need to get out of here. The cage bars pulsed around us, tightening. We were running out of time, and the sleeper was waking. The pulsing walls of the cage were slick beneath my fingers, warm and shifting as if they had veins carrying something far more sinister than blood. The air was thick, almost humid, vibrating with the distant, slow heartbeat of the sleeper. Orin's ragged breath echoed beside me as we crouched in the corner of our prison, our bodies tense, waiting for the inevitable. The Vael'Zir stood motionless beyond the bars, their golden eyes locked onto us, unblinking, their presence both patient and suffocating. The bodies of my former crewmates lay in a neat row before them. Lena, Miko, Rajer, hollow husks of the people they once were. Their skin was tight against their bones, stretched thin like parchment. Their mouths slightly open in silent screams that had long since faded. The golden light that had flickered in their chests was gone, devoured. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I didn't have time to mourn them. If I hesitated, I would share their fate. The cage pulsed again, the organic bars tightening, sensing my resistance. I could feel it, the sleeper itself was aware of me now. A deep, guttural vibration rumbled through the chamber. A resonance that wasn't sound but something deeper, something that gripped the bones and twisted the mind. It was waking up. I turned to Orin, who was barely conscious, his eyes fluttering. He had fought against the Vael'Zir when they captured us, and they had beaten him for it. He was strong, but his strength was fading. I didn't have the luxury of waiting for him to recover. If I was going to escape, I had to do it now. I dug my fingers into the bars, ignoring the way they pulsed against my touch, and pulled with everything I had. The organic material resisted, stretching like tendons under pressure, but I didn't stop. I felt my fingers sink in deeper, as if the cage was trying to absorb me. The thought made me sick, but I used the revulsion to push harder. With a wet, sickening tear, the bars gave way. I tumbled forward, landing hard on the fleshy ground. Orin groaned behind me, but I had no time to check on him. The Vael'Zir hadn't moved yet. They stood in eerie stillness, watching, waiting, testing me. I wasn't about to wait for their judgment. I grabbed Orin's arm and hauled him to his feet. He stumbled, barely able to support his weight, but I forced him forward. We ran. The corridors of the hive pulsed with shifting light, the bioluminescent walls guiding us forward as if leading us deeper instead of toward escape. The air was thick, humming with the whispers of something colossal, something ancient. The sleeper's breath was no longer distant. It was a presence, curling around my thoughts, listening. Behind us, I heard the sound of something moving, a low, inhuman growl. I didn't look back. Oren stumbled, and I caught him before he hit the ground. He was barely staying conscious, his skin pale, his lips cracked. He wasn't going to make it much farther. Then, ahead, a branching tunnel, one leading downward into the unknown, the other sloping upward toward the surface. I had a choice: go up, leave Oren behind, save myself, or take him with me, knowing it would slow us down. I clenched my teeth and tightened my grip on him. I wasn't leaving anyone behind. I pulled him forward, half dragging him up the incline, my muscles screaming in protest. My heart pounded against my ribs, every breath burning my lungs. I had no way of knowing if we were heading toward the Argos or deeper into the creature's body. Then, a shadow moved ahead of us. I skidded to a stop. A figure stepped out from the corridor, tall, lean, familiar. Novak, or what was left of him. His human form was almost entirely gone now. His skin had turned a deep shade of black and blue, scales catching the dim light. His fingers were elongated, clawed, his golden eyes filled with something vast and unknowable. He regarded me with something close to amusement, his mouth curling into a smile too wide for a human face. "You can't leave," he said softly. His voice wasn't his anymore. It was layered, as if something else was speaking through him. I tightened my grip on my rifle. "I'm not staying." He tilted his head. "You still resist." "You're damn right I do." He took a slow step forward, movements fluid, unnatural. "The sleeper knows you now. It has seen you, touched you. You will never escape it. You are already part of it." Aimed my rifle at his chest, but something deep inside me hesitated. Novak had been my friend. I had trusted him, worked beside him for years. He had been part of my crew, and now, he was just another extension of the sleeper. And he was going to kill me. I pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, the force knocking Novak back, his body jerking as the bullet tore through his chest. But he didn't fall. He laughed, a hollow, inhuman sound. His body cracked, twisted, reformed. The wound I had inflicted sealed itself almost instantly. I fired again, and again. He barely flinched. Then he lunged. I barely had time to react. His claws tore through my shoulder, sending me crashing to the ground. Pain shot through me like fire, but I ignored it. I rolled, grabbed my knife, and drove it into his throat. Novak gurgled, his golden eyes widening. For a brief moment, he looked almost human again. Then he collapsed. I pulled the blade free, panting, blood, his and mine, coating my hands. There was no time to process what I had done. I grabbed Oren, forced myself up, and ran. The Argos was where we had left it. Empty, lifeless, its once bustling interior now a hollow shell. My hands trembled as I activated the launch sequence, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The ship felt wrong without the others. Every seat was empty, every console untouched. Once, this vessel had been filled with my crew, my friends. Now it was a tomb. Guilt gnawed at my chest, but there was no time for grief. I secured Oren in a seat, strapped myself in, and powered up the engines. That's when the voice came, a deep, impossible voice, vibrating inside my skull. "You think you can escape me?" The very air around me seemed to darken. "I know where your home is now. You all will be mine." The sleeper was fully awake. The space around us rippled. A shadow fell over the ship. I looked out the viewport. The sleeper's eyes were open. It was moving, its colossal mouth yawning open, a black void stretching beyond comprehension. It was going to consume us. I activated the thrusters, forcing the ship forward. But it was too late. The void swallowed everything. I knew this was the end. With shaking hands, I activated the distress beacon, sending one final message to Earth, a warning. Then, as the darkness closed around me, I closed my eyes and accepted my fate, the end.